Hello, I am back with my friend Anna because it is Women's Prize season. Woo! Yay! Sorry, I went a bit Oprah there. But,
you get a Women's Prize.
You get a Women's Prize. But yay! If only. Oh gosh, imagine if she hosted it. That'd be amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I think this has escalated immediately to imagine if Oprah hosted a Women's Prize.
I mean, it could happen. We have Sarah Jessica Parker on the Booker Prize judges this coming year. But anyway, so it is the start of the season. I'm sure many of you have watched our videos for years and years because this is a lovely tradition that my wonderful friend Anna, James, and I do, where we make our predictions, guesses, wish list for what will be on the long list for this year's Women's Prize for Fiction. And do you want to introduce yourself just in case people haven't watched our videos before and don't know you?
My name's Anna James. I am primarily an author these days. I used to be an arts journalist, still dabble a little bit, but I'm a children's fantasy author primarily these days. And I'll just quickly plug my book coming out in June called Alice with a Y, which is an Alice in Wonderland. Well, we're calling it Return to Wonderland. We actually had an extensive back and forth about whether we were calling it a retelling or a reimagining or a sequel. But it's about Alice's granddaughter. So if you're a Wonderland fan, that's coming out in June. Yeah. But general bookish sort. And my list is a weird combination of it's a mix of books I've read that I would like to be there, books I would like to read, books I think will be there, books that other people seem to be talking about consistently as being very good. It's a whole
mixture.
Mash.
And how we do this, the structure is because there are always 16 books on the Women's Prize long list. So we've each selected 16 books, but we don't know what each other has chosen. So we are going to go back and forth, revealing these colorful cards to see what we've picked, to see if we have any in common, and then have discussions about the books of why we picked them, and have a nice long bookish chat. Although we try to be concise, we always aim for brevity, but often fail.
I was gonna say, usually these are feature film length videos. So thanks for sticking with them.
So grab yourself a cup of tea if you want to settle in for this season of the Women's Prize for Fiction. Obviously, this is an award that honors the best novel written by a woman published in the past year in English. And the eligibility window is the beginning of April last year, 2024, to the end of March this year. It needs to have been published in the UK within that time. And the actual official long list will be announced on March 4th. I have a little card over here to remind me. That's why I keep glancing over that way. Then the shortlist will be on April 2nd, which I find it very easy to remember because that is my husband's birthday. So that's very
Although that's sweet. A shorter window. So usually we get about 6 weeks with the long list. And this year it's only a month, which we'll see. I'm not sure how I feel about that because I like to try and read the long list, but that is 4 books a week. And that I'm not sure unless I'm very lucky with having read a few of them / they happen to be very slim. I just don't think that is feasible alongside life and work. But we'll see how it goes.
So I'm very excited to see what Anna has picked, but we would love to know your predictions as well. So let us know about that in the comments, or if you're inspired to read any of these books after we talk about them, or if you agree with our choices, disagree with our choices, if you want to nicely disagree, and then we can civilly put in the comments if you have any disagreements with us, then feel free to let us know. And I'd love to hear your opinions. So let's dive into it and start. So we're going alphabetical order by author surname, and we see where we match up and where we differ in our choices. Do you want to start with your first prediction?
Okay, here we go. My first pick is Good Girl by Aria Aber.
I don't think I've heard of this. Oh, okay.
So I must admit, because I haven't read enough books that are eligible to make up a whole long list, I ended up doing, looking at what I thought was eligible, got a bit overwhelmed because I started making a list of everything that was eligible. They got to 130 books and got really overwhelmed and
She's very methodical about
it. But then I stopped. I haven't been that methodical because I just got panicked and stopped at that point.
You have to,
so this is, I've also just I'm just glancing, when I glance this way, it's to remind myself of
Made some notes.
why I decided to put this. Okay, but first of all, so this is about, it's a debut novel, and it's about the daughter of Afghan refugees living in Berlin, and it's her like reflecting back on her like early 20s years when she's dealing with the grief of her mother's death, who was like a feminist revolutionary, by like partying, and she, I think, has an affair with like an older like author character. And it's her reflecting back on that. Oh, and it has a blurb from Raven Lalani. So I think in some ways it's like that like disaster woman narrative of her, because I think she's like lots of drugs and partying in Berlin. But I think I've had enough of a gap from that. And I also think this is an interesting perspective on that. And it's about race and Berlin and finding yourself and grief, and it just sounds great. A lot of the criteria for me picking things is I would like to read this. It sounds good and I would like to read it. You know, I think like that disaster millennial woman is a genre that still bubbles on. I think people have kind of done with its initial iteration.
Yeah, so
like,
I was going to say, I feel like I have read a lot of it, especially like affairs with younger women and older men, and
As I haven't read it, so I might be slightly misrepresenting the plot. I'm kind of done with like the kind of, you know, middle-class white woman having a crisis part of it, but I'm still interested in different perspectives on that genre. I like books with author characters in. I think it's always fun when authors kind of like skewer like literary culture and publishing parties and authors. Like I find that fun to read.
Yeah. So. And so for my selections, I have picked all books that I have actually read and would recommend, except for one. And the very first one is the one that I haven't read because it just naturally falls that way.
You haven't read it, or you wouldn't recommend it?
I have not read it.
Okay.
But
I thought you were going to say it's one you've read but you wouldn't recommend. I'm like, controversial.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, yeah, unless I really thought like strategically, like, oh, the judges are definitely going to pick this, even though, yeah. So I've not read this, partly because it's not been published yet.
Okay.
But I am so excited for it. It is Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Yeah.
Her first novel in like almost a decade or so.
Yes.
It's been a really long time since she's had a new novel out, and I absolutely love her fiction, and so I'm very excited by this. And this story follows 4 women who are kind of have connections with each other between Nigeria and America as they're kind of figuring life out and exploring the complexities of love in many different forms. And I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited for it.
I went back and forth on including this one.
Okay.
Obviously, because she won the Women's Prize of Women's Prize. The 25th,
the queen of all queens. Drag Race queens.
But not to just make this controversial straight away. She obviously has become a more controversial figure with her views on trans women. I'm not sure if that will have an impact. Like, it's bad. I think that versus the fact that she's like the Women's Prize winner of winners, with the fact that since then she has become a more controversial figure.
Yeah.
That it's impossible to know how that will play. Honestly, a lot of that will be down to like the individual opinions of the judges and where they stand on such things. And we can't guess that.
And it's a really tricky thing for me as a reader. It's like somebody who's like always read her books, loved her books, and I'm aware of this controversy around her. Like, and honestly, I just like haven't looked into it like too much. I think like partly because like I'm afraid of like what I might find, but like at the same time, I've like heard her speak in person and talk about trans issues in a way that I don't have an issue with, and so like it's so like until like, you know, I see things she's actually said or done that might make it more problematic for me to read and enjoy her books. But it's just the tricky things with reading that there's like the books and then there's the author, and of course those things can't always be like entirely divorced, but there's
and we all have our own
big issue.
Takes on these things. We also all have our own takes on like the separating art from the artist, where that everyone has a slightly different line sometimes as well. Like, she's a tricky one in terms of how she talks about it, honestly, and I don't think this is the video to get into it. And also the prize has been not sure how it feels. I think, you know, there was the year where it had a trans author on the long list alongside an extremely outspoken anti-trans person, and they were both on the long list, you know? So I think that there's not like a a settled route there. Also, honestly, you know what, when you're trying to get like 130 books down to 16, you just need like one passing reason to be like, you know what, no, because here's a reason not to put it on. Yeah. My next choice is Girls by Kirsty Capes.
Another one I've not heard of, I don't think.
Good Girl and Girls. It's the women's prize.
Yeah.
So this one, so she was on the long list in 2022 for Careless, which I didn't read, but I'm not sure if you got to it.
No, I've not read that, I don't think.
And she also did her PhD with Bernadine Evaristo as her supervisor. So I feel like she's got like, you know, like, or just, you know, those things I feel like are in her corner. And I also just love the sound of the book. It's about two sisters who go on a road trip to, their mother was like a very difficult woman but a very successful artist, and when she dies she wants her daughters to scatter her ashes and throw her paintings in the ocean. And so these two sisters go on a road trip together, and I love sister books, and I think that it sounds, again, it's another one that I just really would like to read. And you know, she's been on the long list before, so just that's my rationale.
Good choice. Great.
It's got a great cover too, so
okay,
and it looks quite like accessible in a like an enjoyable read. And again, this is dangerous territory to be trying to assess what the judges want, because sometimes what a judge writes, what a judge reviews well, has absolutely zero bearing on them what they pick for the prize. And the long list for the women's prize is also notoriously chaotic, I would say. Like, very often very random. However, I would say that we've got a few judges that I think value something being like a good read, again, like an enjoyable read.
Okay, and I've not even like looked into that, of what the judges' choices might be. Just
to say, the judges are, Kit Duvall is the chair of judges, and then we've got Diana Evans, who wrote Ordinary People,
and
Bryony Gordon, Deborah Joseph, and Amelia Warner.
Mm-hmm.
Who's Jamie Dornan's wife.
Oh.
So let's hope he comes to the ceremony.
That would be so exciting.
And she's a very talented musician as well. Terrible feminism. Celebrating the women's prize by someone's handsome husband.
But Jamie don't know.
So those are the judges.
Okay.
Which you can't really read too much into, but just for interest.
Okay, my next pick is Confessions by Catherine Airy.
I didn't pick this, but I nearly did. This was one of the last ones I took off my list.
Yes, and I just read this very recently, and it's one of those interesting books that it was kind of slow to start, and or at least like at the beginning it seemed like a very conventional sort of narrative, which I thought, I was like, I'm engaged by this, but I don't really see like what the point and sort of hype is about it. But as the story goes on, it really builds up in its both its like complexity and its emotional impact. And so I assume you're vaguely aware of what it's about, but just to press upon you to like try to get you to read it. I have some particular points that I think that hopefully will sell it to everybody, but I know to Anna in particular, hopefully this will sell it to you. So my 3 points are this primarily at its core, it's a story about sisters and their bond, but also the complexity of their relationship and the difficulties of between sisters that can sometimes occur. Also, there are lots of literature references throughout it, but quite a lot about Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Topical to Alice with a Y coming out soon. And then thirdly, so if I was going to compare this to other fiction, I would describe it as somewhere a cross between Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, but also Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth.
Right, both books. Wow, you
know
me very well.
We've been making videos and talking about books for such a long time, but I know Anna's taste and know how to like draw her in with
that was a real like 1, 2, 3 I'm obviously need to read this regardless of whether it's on the prize or not.
It's very good. And so the story in general is about multiple generations of women between America and Ireland. And so it kind of begins in New York City in 2001 with the plane crashes in the World Trade Center, and follows a teenage girl and her life after that. But it kind of tunnels back through time to show previous generations of her mother and aunt, and between Ireland and America. But also at its center, there's a kind of video game that kind of centers around a school for girls, which is another, I know, good thing for Anna, and which kind of makes me think of like Plain Bad Heroines, because it's kind of like, is this like haunted and this school, and then that kind of works its way into the video game version of it. But it's not so much like about the like hauntedness of it or past of it, but more about the girls and women who have inhabited this house over a long period of time, and how it like builds that up and the story of that, but also how this kind of rudimentary video game filters through the generations of these women to tell a kind of parallel story of their lives. And so it is like about like family connections, but and also about how much or little we know about our family's past, and so like especially of people that only can kind of piece together from bits of information about what a previous generation has gone through. And I think that's just handled really beautifully. And
you sold me. Yeah.
So I
really nearly chose that one. My next pick is Shy Creatures by Clare Chambers.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yay! Oh, it's on the same colour.
Oh yeah, isn't that nice?
Which I haven't read.
And I have.
But obviously Small Pleasures was on the list 3 years ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
And I loved it until the end.
We both loved like 99.5% of that book.
Oh my goodness. And then I felt betrayed by the ending. If you've read it, you will know, like really betrayed by it.
Literally in the last page or two of the book.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't need a happy ending, but I felt tricked a little bit by the way it was done. Anyway, but having said that, we loved 99% of it. I loved her writing so much, and so I hope that you've read it.
I have, and I can confirm that the ending is satisfying. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I just loved her writing. This is set. You should do but it's set in the 60s, like about an art therapist and all. So I just have really high hopes that, because I know I like her writing, that without that like 1-2 switch at the end, that I am really hoping I'll really get on.
I think you will.
Okay.
So it is set in the 1960s in South London, and in a mental hospital where an art therapist works, and we follow her life primarily. She's having an affair with a doctor at this hospital, and then jointly they are called in to a house where a reclusive man has been discovered, who has like blonde hair and who has basically been in hiding for many years. He's silent as well. So it's about like the mystery of his backstory, what he went through, why he's in this situation, but also dealing with her complicated present because the doctor she's having an affair with, he's married, and but also dealing with a younger female relative of hers who's also like dealing with her own mental health issues. So it's about these kind of like mental health issues, but also like, especially me, like I really personally related to as someone who is of a more like shy or introverted nature, of like of exploring like the inner lives of people who are like this, and dealing with sort of the trickiness of sociability and like adapting and being a part of the outer world. And I just thought it was really delicately and beautifully explored, and so I found it a wonderful story, and was also like quite gripped because it didn't go. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it didn't go like entirely the way I was like expecting or predicting,
but
and
not
so
in an annoying way.
yeah, not in not in a really annoying way, and had a very I'm not going to say it's positive or negative, but satisfying ending.
Yes.
So I
Great.
think that's nice. We have our first
match
as well. So my next pick is a quite long novel called Our London Lives by Christine Dwyer Hickey.
This was another one that I had on my... I went from like probably like 130 down to about like 60, and then I got down to about 30 and I got really stuck. And this was on that, like that last list that I had to like halve.
Yeah.
This was on that. I think
she's
this
a very
great.
well-regarded author, Irish author, and so this story follows two Irish individuals who moved to London in the 1990s, I think, and follows them over a period of decades, both their separate stories and the way they sometimes connect over a long period of time. And it's kind of, it's in like part a romance because they do have like a romantic connection with each other at different times, but it's really not so much about that relationship, but more about their individual relationships to the city, especially as immigrants and people who have moved here, which made me like really personally like relate to it in a number of ways as somebody who moved to London and who feels very like at home in the city, like this is my home, but at the same time feel like alienated in different ways and also like struggle to navigate it sometimes. And so I think it is really smart in how it traces how a city and a culture can rapidly progress in a way that like an individual isn't necessarily keeping up with, and there's just this like beautiful way in how especially like if you've lived in a particular city for a long period of time, there will be certain areas which you develop a certain emotional attachments with and have memories of, and how it traces them over time as they revisit some of these locations, and almost I feel like we almost become like ghosts to ourselves, and that we're like haunting like our past when we'll come across an area or a house or a street and we'll suddenly like recall so strongly something that occurred to us personally there in the past, and the way it follows them through this, I think, is so beautifully done, and it's just a novel that I feel like not all that many people have been talking about, and so I really hope it gets some prize attention, and her writing is just gorgeous as well, and really
I feared it sounded a little bleak. Is it? Would you say it's a bleak book, or because melancholy I like, bleak I don't like? I would say. What side of the line would you say it comes down on?
I'd say it treads that line. I would call it more melancholy,
but it's on the edge.
It is.
Okay.
I think there's humor. There's great like characterization in it. So it's like I found it at least like a wonderfully lively read. But
we'll see. I'll report back if you're the same as me. I'll report back. My next pick is Briefly Very Beautiful by Dineen. I haven't read it. I promise I have read some of them. Just the alphabet is against me. This is like it's climate fiction essentially, and I do wonder if we'll see something climate-y on there. It really, honestly, sounds quite akin to The End We Start From by Megan Hunter, which I really loved.
Yeah, that's a great book.
And that was a lot of why. It's about a young mother whose husband is working overseas as a medic, and she has 3 kids, I think, and it's in the kind of like a near dystopia where the climate is, everything hasn't completely fallen apart yet, but like the climate is starting to really start to have its impact. And basically she leaves the city to try and find a safer place for her kids, and it's about that journey. Again, as I say, this is what I have picked up. I apologise if I'm misrepresenting the plot. But it was shortlisted or longlisted for the Climate Fiction Prize. And again, it just I really enjoyed The End We Start From. And
I hadn't heard of that, so that's good to know about. Okay, my next pick is The Lion's Den by Iris Mwanza.
I have not heard of this one.
Okay. Well, yeah, hopefully I haven't thought of points to sell it to you, but hopefully my description will sell it to you. I'd be like a bookseller.
Yeah.
This is, I think this came out like early summer last year, but I only read it in January this year. So this is set in Zambia in the 1990s, and the protagonist is a female lawyer. She's just got her degree and taking on her very first case, which is a pro bono case of a young man who has been arrested and persecuted for being gay and for wearing women's clothing.
Right.
And it follows the incredible difficulty she goes through trying to defend his case. And it's really moving how it describes this very present issue in Zambia and a number of other countries where sexual relations between same-sex couples is illegal, and but even more than that, like the social stigma surrounding it, which of course is due in part to colonial laws that were inherited and religion, but is really big issue, and that is still going on today. So how it highlights and explores that, but also how in defending cases that they can be politicized in a way so that even if there is progressive change and hope and steps that can be drawn into a much larger political argument, which isn't necessarily for the benefit of individuals involved, but is more about kind of playing politics. And so I thought it was really smart how it explored all of that, but also just exploring this young woman's journey in becoming a lawyer. And she comes from very humble circumstances and had a difficult background, and how she's progressed onto this stage where she's encountering people who are a bit more of the financial and political elite, and trying to integrate into this society, coming from a small village to then go into a city. It's really moving how it follows that journey, but also why she feels a personal investment in this case and connection to it. I thought it's a really wonderful novel that, again, I kind of hope more people will talk about and get some prize nods. So.
Great. My next pick is Pages of the Sea by Anne Hawke, which is published by a small press.
Oh, yeah.
Weatherglass. So that was part of my rationale as well. I feel like we always see a few small presses represented, which is great. So this is about the Windrush generation that was left behind. So it's about a little girl whose mother in the 60s goes to England and she stays, and it's about her grappling with the family. She thinks she lives with her aunt and cousins, and that relationship is fraught, and her mother being away. But apparently it's quite funny as well. A lot of the blurbs and reviews commented that it had a playfulness to it, and I thought that might be an interesting perspective on a kind of Windrush novel. I think books told from the perspective of a child when they're litfic are tricky to get right, honestly, and I haven't read this one. So it's got a blurb from Monique Roffey.
Oh, great.
But I didn't like the book. I don't know if you've got The Bat and Died on your list, but what was the Black Conch, the Mermaid of Black Conch?
Mermaid of Black Conch, yeah.
I didn't really like that.
Oh, I loved that novel.
Yeah, I feel like it comes into that bucket of books. It's it really felt like The Island of Missing Trees. I feel like there's that particular, I don't know how you'd categorize that type of book, but I feel like that's often where we differ, slightly. That kind of book.
Fantastical, bordering on whimsical.
Yeah, although I like that, I just have very particular tastes about it. I really I'm a massive fantasy reader. But then again, you liked This One Sky Day more than me as well.
Yeah.
I think people, if I was going to make a big statement, I would say that I think litfic writers who write that genre could do with reading some proper fantasy. And I think it would serve them well to read some classic fantasy. Not to do that, but to inform how they approach magical realism and whatever ridiculous thing for me to say. Anyway, I don't believe this has any magical realism in it.
No.
But yeah, it just, again, felt like the sort of book we often see on the list. Sounds good. Small press. Think it sounds like a good read.
And I have heard of that, but I've not read it. So yeah, but I
like the
have been
cover as
wanting
well.
to read it.
Okay. What?
Oh, I was worried you just saw what I
didn't.
what I just flipped over.
No.
Because I'm conscious you
What?
might.
What are you gonna do?
I'm conscious you might make that face when I. So this is the most recent novel by Joyce Carol Oates.
I would be disappointed. Last year, I don't think you picked one. And
I
was like,
know.
what is happening? We are sat in Eric's library, and there's even artwork. That's Joyce Carol.
There is
isn't
Joyce
it?
Carol Oates' picture,
staring
yeah,
at
up
me.
there.
I love that you love this problematic queen. As she tweeted about her toenails recently.
Aww.
Honestly, it's iconic. Like, in the sense of
Yeah.
when she, obviously sometimes she says kind of tricky things, which are a bit, but when she's just like tweeting like mad stuff, I think that's my favourite version of her,
But she also
I've never
tweets like
read-
amazing things too.
No, and I've never
yeah.
read any of her books, which I know. You know what? You know my taste. You should tell me
I need
which one,
to
because she
pick one
writes
up.
so many books. If you, I will read. If you tell me which one you think I would get on with the most, I will read it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Good.
We can report back maybe at a later point. We can have a little Joyce Carol Oates addendum.
Yeah. Be slightly fearful of that. Yeah.
Okay, or I don't have to tell you what I think.
So I was really on the fence of whether to put this on or not, honestly. So the most recent novel is called Butcher, and as you could probably tell from the title, it deals with some quite gruesome subject matter. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is very difficult and challenging to read because of the subject matter. So it presents a 19th century doctor who is conducting medical experiments on the bodies of living women, and at a mental institution where he's
Yikes.
the director of. Incredibly serious subject matter, and not only that, but it does show a lot of this in graphic detail in the prose. So it's difficult to read, but at the same time, sort of like the Margaret Atwood Handmaid's Tale thing, like nothing she put in this novel didn't actually happen. And so this doctor is a kind of composite of a number of doctors that Oates researched that conducted experiments on the bodies of women like this over a period of time. But it's also a story of, so he conducts these experiments on mental institution patients, but also on indentured servants. And the primary character it follows, aside from the doctor, is an indentured servant who works at this hospital, who's experimented upon as well. And it follows her perspective over a period of time. So we really see things from her point of view. And but I think it's a really important book and striking subject matter that she's talking about, kind of showing how misogyny is kind of like inbuilt to the study and development of the medical profession, and how that's a part of it and can be like seen in medical practices today, and but also about is sadly topical in America today, where the rights of women to control their own bodies is coming under threat. And it's incredibly difficult subject matter, but also very sadly topical. Another book that I feel like just not many people have been talking about, and so like part of the reason why I love Oates is she just like says what she thinks and goes with the subject matter that she is most drawn to, no matter how difficult that is, and that might evoke lots of feelings in people, and so and might cause some negative reactions. But we'll talk about what she feels like needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know that is. Let's hope that's not the Joyce Carlos you recommend I start with.
Probably not.
My next pick is another one I haven't read, but one that I feel like I've heard so many people talk about, which is All Fours by Miranda.
Yeah.
Have you didn't go for it though?
No, I've not put it on. I
Okay.
have read it. I was really borderline whether to put it on or
Okay,
not.
I did read the first Bad Man, which I thought was brilliant, although it turned my stomach a little bit, and that's not really my personal taste. Tangent, I don't know if you've picked this actually because it's a Z. The Coin by Yasmin Zaher.
I've not, but I have read that.
Okay,
Yeah, and
because I saw some people whose taste I really rate really raving about that, and I thought it's a small press. It sounds like a sort of, but then I read it this week, and again, I really admired it. I thought it was very well done, but it's just a bit like it's not to my personal taste.
I felt quite complicated about it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how I have this to read. I bought it when it came out. Like, I'm curious. I love her. People really rave about it. It's about an artist, right? Like an artist in her 40s who is going to do a road trip, but then she kind of like diverts and like reinvents, leaves her husband and her child and like tries to reinvent
For a time.
herself.
Yeah.
It's one I'm interested to get to, but I'm not sure. I think it's just gonna be on that line of things that like, I think it might come into the category of books that I kind of admire but aren't my personal taste, but I don't mind. Like, as in, it's always interesting to read those books.
And I have heard a lot of diverging opinions about it, where some people do really appreciate it and relate to it in different ways. And I did, even as a man in my mid-40s, I'm very close in age to the protagonist of sort of, you're at this point in your life when you're like sort of looking back on your life and figuring like, oh, how do I want to go into the future, and have I made the right decisions, and what do I want to do? So it's like grappling with a lot of those issues at that particular age. And I think I kind of appreciated it partly because I have read her work previously and seen her films, so I kind of know what to expect from her, whereas I think some readers who read it having not encountered her or her work before are kind of blindsided by there's a lot of like graphic sexual detail, but also like her kind of I don't like using the word quirky, but she is like quite like,
I mean, if
quirky.
you're going to use it for anyone, I think Miranda July is someone you can use it for.
How she handles her subject matter and her approach, and I would say like I liked the first half of the novel better than the second half, and I think that works better. Sorry, not to put anybody off who wants to start.
No, and it's a book I probably will read at some point.
My next pick is the Lost Love Songs of Boysie, Singh by Ingrid Persaud. And yes, you are supposed to pronounce the D in her surname, so Persaud.
I didn't pick this, although I really nearly did, because we both really liked her debut, Love After Love. I really loved that. And I also judged the RCW prize, Deborah Rogers prize for like new writers with her, and she was a delight.
I've never met her in real life. We've had some messages back and forth.
It was a COVID prize, so we did it all. Me and Ingrid and Colm Tobin on a Zoom call, picking.
So cool!
It was cool. I felt really starstruck just being on a judging panel with him in particular. I was just like, I can't believe our opinions are being treated as like equally relevant to this. And he was also lovely.
I just absolutely loved this book, and it took me a little while to fully like get into it because it is written in a sort of Trinidadian dialect, and so it follows 4 women and with one of the women and who have very different and distinct voices, but all are in a dialect, and with one in particular I found it quite difficult. I had to really concentrate to understand what was going on, but like once I got into the flow of it, really enjoyed it. And so it follows 4 women in the early to mid 1900s in Trinidad, and who are all connected to a particular man, Boysie Singh, who's kind of becomes a kind of gangster slash sort of wheeler dealer type man, and about their different connections with him. Sometimes they have conflicts with each other, and that can become quite dramatic. But I also know I've heard from some readers who found that slightly problematic to read about, of basically like women competing against women for like the attention of a man, but same time that happens. But I think it does. I mean, you follow them over a long period of time, and they are definitely on their own personal journeys, kind of outside of his sphere, and are also like manipulating him in some ways to try to get what they want, and so it shows these complicated relationships, but also is like touching upon Trinidadian life, and because Boysie was a real life historical figure, and so is looking at this incredible confluence of different cultures and nationalities and religions that occur in Trinidad. So it's kind of like melting pot of a culture, but also the way that Ingrid Persaud writes, I just find it so lively and fun. Like I was so engaged in reading this and really enjoyed the experience, even though there is some difficult subject matter and scenes that occur in it, but the voices, like once I get into the dialogue, I find it so engaging to read,
great.
And so it's an absolute pleasure, and I just enjoy reading
Love
it
After
so
Love
much.
was like that as well, wasn't it? Like it was quite heavy. Like I cried a lot at the end, but it was lively, is a good word for it. So you say that he was like a wheeler dealer, but he was a serial killer.
Yes, he was also actually a killer. Yeah, as well.
Sorry, that romanticize.
I'm not. I shouldn't like play down his crimes. Which but I mean he is held accountable to him, and he at the very beginning, you see he's basically on death row, basically. So
I did actually do a bit of. I got distracted by. I found him interesting. I ended up reading a bit about the real life guy because that was just interesting. And
it is really
do you know if the women are based on real women?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Could also, I don't know if this indiscreet of me, but and I'm not going to say how I know this, but this came very close to making the Booker Prize Longlist last year. But, okay, I want to say that.
Know.
Yeah, so I think a lot of judges
delightful.
is very well respected.
I love what counts as scandal in this room. That's interesting to know, though. Okay, a big moment, everyone. This is a book I've read. My next pick is Real Americans by Rachel Khong.
Okay. Which I've not read, but I've been wanting to read.
I loved this. I've not read anything by Rachel before, but I just recorded an episode of my podcast with her. So I read Goodbye Vitamin, her debut, which was very well.
Yes, which I loved. Yeah,
beautiful. And then I read this. It's interesting actually reading them back to back because they're very different books in many ways, but there are universal themes to them. Also, I loved talking to her on my podcast. That episode probably won't be out when this goes live, but she was so interesting and smart and warm.
I'll put a link to your podcast below. So
thank you. It's me talking to writers about their most beloved children's book, but it's not for children. It's about and it's a mix of adult authors and children's authors talking about how the books we read when we are kids inform us as readers and writers. She picked Half Magic by Edward Eger, which is an American book that I hadn't. It's not in print here anymore.
Oh, okay.
She also, which gets green flag for me, is very respectful about children's books. She spoilers for the podcast, but she was saying about how she really went back to children's books when she was writing this because she wanted to try and capture that like propulsive, immersive feel of when you're engaged in a children's book. So it's very much lit fic, but like it is so readable and engaging, and I thought I love that she went back to kids' books to think about like why do you like get so involved in a book when you're a kid. This is about 3 generations of a Chinese American family. The first one's like Y2K, and then it's like around now, and then it's the future, but like 2030, not super far in the future. And it's about like free will and choice, and like how we become who we are, and how much the decisions of our families and how much our decisions and how much the world, nature versus nurture sounds a bit trite, but like essentially how we kind of become who we are and what we have control over and what we don't have control over, and how we decide about the things we do have control over. It's also kind of about genetics and DNA in like a very light way, which is interesting. And it's so well written. Essentially, I just loved her writing. I found all three voices, you know, dual POV, it doesn't swap, it's like one chunk, each chunk is separate, you don't switch between them. And I think every time I switched, I was like, well, I want to stay with this person, which is always a good sign. But then once I got into the new voice, I really enjoyed
invested
them.
in that too.
And I just think her writing is wonderful. It's gone down very well in America in particular. I feel like it hasn't necessarily had as much like buzz here, although it's not out in paperback yet, which might help it along. It's like was a New York Times bestseller in the US and was sort of very, very got starred reviews and things. And I would love to see it kind of pick up that momentum here, because I just think it's really excellently done book.
And I would love a good excuse to finally get to reading, because it has been one that's definitely on my radar that I've been wanting to read and just haven't. And I love a multi-generational story, so
it's really good. It's really good.
Been talking about.
And I've read it.
So. Yay!
I do read books.
Definitely
I just read a lot.
Of course, but you're very busy.
And I also read a lot of not frontlist. I read a lot of backlist children's books and a lot of backlist fantasy as well. Like I don't read as much as you, but like I feel like this makes it seem like I only read 10 books a year. I just am less focused on frontlist.
So my next choice is A Little Trickerie by Rosanna Pike.
Oh, I so nearly went for this and I didn't because I picked another book instead that I think has similar themes. Oh, it's my next one.
Okay, well, then we'll talk about it then.
Okay.
So this is set in medieval England, following a girl and her mother who are in very difficult circumstances, and fairly, this isn't so much a spoiler because very early on in the novel her mother dies, so she's kind of left on her own to fend for herself. It's about the connection she forms with other people to try to for them to try to support themselves. But one of the ways that she tries to support herself is she enters into this scheme where she pretends to be an angel and therefore trick people to come and like make donations, and this is based on a real historical incident that occurred, and so the church and religion had a lot of influence at this time. She shows in it a lot about how that can be both a supportive thing, but there's also a lot of corruption in the church. So she is kind of using that to like manipulate the system for her own advantage, and but also how she forms a very it's kind of dual narrative, and like primarily following her, but also a very close friend of hers who's gay, and so dealing with the difficulty of homosexuality in this period of time centuries ago. But also it becomes a really gripping story. Like I got really tense wondering how it was going to resolve, and so I found myself really glued to it, as well as I really enjoyed how it playfully explored this like time period and subject matter in a way which was taking it seriously, but also was written in a way that was very engaging and fun to read.
I'm really looking forward to it. I have a proof of this and it's one I keep meaning to get to. Whimsical literary historical fiction is really something I enjoy. Having said that, I didn't pick it. I took it off my list because I picked Rapture by Emily Maguire.
Okay, I don't know that one.
It's not out yet. It's coming out, like it's only just eligible. I think it comes like at the end of March, although I wonder if they'll shift that if it's longlisted. Anyway. It's similar. It's about a girl in the 9th century. Who basically disguises herself as a boy to enter a convent. Not a convent, crucially a monastery. As John the Englishman. And then it's basically her life. I haven't read it, so I don't know, again, with pronouns, I don't know I don't know if the character is trans or it's just, or it's like a playful thing. Anyway, as in, if it's a trans thing, I'm not misgendering them on purpose. I just haven't read it yet.
You haven't read it.
And goes on this kind of like essentially life of chaos, becoming like a kind of like they are in a monastery, and then they become like this, they're described as a charismatic heretic in the blurb, and then they go on to like be a scholar in Rome, causing havoc wherever they go. And that, it just sounds like huge fun, and again kind of hits very much about the influence of the church at that time and on gender, and I think it seems to hit a lot of the similar things without having read either of them. They seem to be playing in the same sandbox. Is that a phrase?
Probably one. Yeah.
Sandpit?
So it's likely to be one or the other, but you never know. Like sometimes the judges go for both, some very similar books.
They're both very appealing to me, and I would like to read both of them and will read both of them at some point. They're very much my sort of thing.
Really interesting, because another one of my choices is along kind of those similar lines. So it'll be interesting if you've heard of it.
Okay.
But that's not my next pick. My next pick is Sweet Vidalia by Lisa Sandlin.
I haven't come across this one.
This only came out in January, and this is a novel set in the 1960s, 50s, 60s in Texas, following a woman who has a very dramatic opening, which I won't reveal, but basically her life is completely changed, that not only is there a big tragic occurrence, but everything she thought she knew about her life isn't really what it is, and she is in her mid to late 50s. Basically, after this event, she's left financially destitute, and she has lived her entire life as a mother and a homemaker, and how she goes to get an education and tries to get a job for the first time in her life, and so about the challenge of building your life from the ground up in a later stage of life. And I thought that was really sensitively explored, but also it's written in a way which, even though it's incredibly difficult, the things she's dealing with, it's there's a lightheartedness and playfulness to it. So she goes to live in this basically motel named Sweet Vidalia. That's why it's named Sweet Vidalia. And it's about the many people she encounters there and at her school that she goes to, and how these are also people that are kind of grappling with their lives and where to go in their lives. It includes a very dramatic bus journey to go to visit a family at Thanksgiving, which I found is a really gripping scene. And I really enjoyed the way it was written, and her writing is I think quite rightly compared to like Anne Tyler and Elizabeth Strout. So it's that sort of tone of narrative, and really enjoyed it.
My next pick is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell.
Oh, yeah.
Which I haven't read.
I've not read, and I want to read as well. Yeah.
I mean, it's been very well reviewed, hasn't it? It's a debut, and it was like a bestseller in Ireland, and I feel like it feels very women's pricey. It's about a woman who is in an abusive relationship, and on the spur of the moment, I believe, decides to take her daughter's children and leave. But then it's about in Dublin, and is about the challenges of her trying to make it work and free herself of his control, but also just keep herself and her children safe and looked after in a hotel room. And apparently it's very good. And it sounds gorgeous, very well reviewed.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I've heard really good
women,
things about it.
You know, feels like the sort of thing one tends to see on the women's prize list.
And I'd be very happy if it's listed, because I've been wanting to read it, and I love Irish fiction. So,
likewise, I'm looking forward to reading it. It's one I will probably read regardless.
My next choice is
what's that face?
The Rivers in the Sky by Elif.
I did pick this one. How many? Oh look, I've got two more before this one.
Okay.
But I did choose this one.
So we do have a match. I assume you've not read it yet.
No, I haven't. No, I want to be proved wrong. I've only read what's
Island of Missing Trees.
That's the only book I've read of hers. And if you followed along, was it last year or the year before?
The year before, I think.
I didn't get on with that book. which I feel like I ended up feeling more potently just because we were talking about it so much and other people loved it so much. And I think like in day-to-day life, I probably just read it and been like, it's not for me.
Which happens with following prizes.
Yeah, you end up just working yourself up into like a frenzy. But I admire her so much, and I feel like she's written loads of different books with like very different feels and topics, and I would love to love her. So I am like very much willing and wanting to enjoy this book.
Yeah. Sorry, I was only smiling because I'm aware of the history of reading that book together and talking about it.
I feel bad. I like her so much, and
she's
I like
amazing.
live in horror that she's gonna. I live in horror that she will have seen me talking about her book because I admire her so much. Like it really haunts me when I see her at stuff. I'm like, I feel guilty and panicked. And you know what? Maybe I'll well, you know my taste. You've read the book, so do you think this will be more to my taste? No.
No, I think probably it is. And I'm also gonna say now, I think this probably won't only be listed, but it has a very good chance of winning this year. Which maybe is a stretch, but I don't know.
I've only heard rave reviews of it.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great. I mean, I think this is her 4th or 5th book by her I've read, and I think it is my favorite. It's very ambitious, as you've probably read about in the summary, in that there's 3 main strands of the story of characters who are very different from each other in slightly different time periods and places, but then they kind of eventually weave together in a way which I found incredibly artful. I mean, it begins in a kind of medieval time, but then comes more into the present, and is about a number of different things and big subject matter, but the way she combines it and tells this story, which is comes to feel so epic and beautiful and really moving, following it, that I was very touched, and I think it's such a great novel. But also one of the narrators of the novel is a drop of water, and so that is the slight area where I could see where some readers' patience can be slightly tested, or when it gets tipped slightly a bit too much into the whimsical territory.
But again, I love whimsy, but I don't like that kind of thing. I struggled with the fig tree narrating. Oh no.
But it's I would also say that that's not too much a part of the book. It just kind of drips in now and then onto the story. Sorry, that's so cheesy of me. But
we shall see. Also, because one of the things I struggled with the islands as well was I found that the voices between the perspectives were too similar.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see as well with this one.
I think they're quite distinct, because also I think the style of the storytelling between the different narrative threads is quite distinct as well. So.
I am open-hearted. Less open-hearted now I know about the drop of water, but still open-hearted.
Very intrigued to see what you make of it.
You know what? It feels like the only book that I'm confident will be on the long list, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's basically a shoo-in.
Yeah. This is another one that I have read. This is a book that I don't necessarily think will be longlisted. As in, I would love it to be, but I think that it might not be shortlisted, submitted. Who knows? It's The Modern Fairies by Clare Pollard.
Okay.
I love this book. It was one of my favourite books that I read last year, and I would love to see it get a boost. You never know. Maybe it has been. It is gorgeous. It was the last book I read last year, and easily in my favourite. So it's set in Paris, about 100 years before the French Revolution. And it's about the salons, that are literary salons, where fairy tales kind of started to move from being kind of oral storytelling to being written down. And they were mainly led by aristocratic women. And it's about those gatherings and their lives, and certain sections of it are told in a fairy tale style. A lot of it is kind of their lives, and it's kind of sexy, but in a kind of Angela Carter kind of way. It's a bit it's not grotesque quite. It's not like Miranda July the Pisces, but it has like it's quite explicit at points. But Angela Carter, I think, is a good reference for the whole book, like with the fairy tales and the women and sexiness and it's about like being a woman essentially and making a life and making a narrative at a tricky time. It's got like a bit of it's fun in many ways, even though it takes some darker turns. It has that kind of like, sexy Versailles fun. But the ending made me cry because it's so beautifully done, because things sort of escalate and get bad for the women. But the way she does it and pulls in fairy tale motifs at the end, I just thought it was exquisitely written. Just sometimes a book is just your sort of thing. Yeah. It's just the sort of book I enjoy reading. I thought it was exquisitely written. It's got a beautiful cover. And I think that if it had a bit more, I think a lot of people would really enjoy it. And I think you should read it, even if it's not longlisted.
Great, fab. I'm very intrigued. Yeah.
It's also nice and short.
Oh, good.
Which is always
a help.
It is, yes.
When there's so many books.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
My next choice, which I assume is going to be on your list as well, Gliff
Yay!
by Ali Smith.
Do you know what? I put this on, even though I think it's a bit of a toss-up whether it will be. Because I think whoever people like Ali's writing is always, again, not... Who knows? I don't know. It's just something in me that thinks it's not going to get longlisted. But I put it on anyway because I love it and we love Ali and I would like it to be longlisted. And it's one of my favourites of Ali's books that I've read. I've read not all, but a lot of them, and it's up there for me. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely in Ali's library, but also is going to some different places. I feel. Yeah.
It's about two siblings in again, this is the kind of like near dystopia, isn't it? It's set in an unspecified...
Ali's pony dystopia, as she likes to call it.
Yes. It's set in a near future that's not got a date to it, where things have started to fall apart a bit. And it's about two siblings who end up having to fend for themselves, kind of basically trying to look after each other and find safety. It then jumps forward a little bit further into the future as their paths have diverged and how they... sort of what happens there, and one of them is non-binary, and it's about them kind of thinking about that and how that lands in a future where these things perhaps are, the binary is being more reinstated, like you talk about, the way things are going at the moment. And
I'm also, like almost crying just like thinking about that scene. It's so powerfully done. Sorry, I'm like welling up.
It's beautifully done.
It's really
the character
powerful.
is generally just handled with such love and with such beauty. But the whole book is also about binaries of like language and rules, and the book generally is about language, as all of Ali's books are. I mean, she's like, well, what book isn't about language? If your book isn't about language, then you're doing something wrong, which she's right. But also her book is quite explicitly a lot. Like, the younger sibling enjoys like looking up words and knowing what words mean and using words in like wrong ways. And there's also a horse.
And they befriend a horse. Sorry, wipe the tears out of my eyes.
It's a gorgeous book. It's and we're such Ali fangirls. So we love her.
Anna did a beautiful interview with Ali about this book a few months ago at the Lush Book Club. So but like with all of Ali Smith's fiction, I would say like for the first, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 pages, I was sort of thinking, like, what is going on here? Like, felt really, like, disorientated. But then in that, like, magical Ali Smith way, I got so invested in it. And these characters, their beautiful relationship with each other, which isn't, like, idealized in any way, like a sibling relationship, but just, but the way she handles their conversations and dealing with each other, and the way she captures adolescent voices, I think, is really true to life, and like and unlike many other authors that I've read, and to capture like the curiosity and mischievousness, and it's very so playful. Beautiful, but also there's some very dark moments in this, because she's dealing with basically like an increasingly totalitarian system, and one that is wants everyone to be like defined in a very
Yeah.
certain way. And
Yeah, the sibling relationship is gorgeous. I love how it captures that your sibling can be the most annoying person in the world and also the person that you would literally sacrifice anything for. And, you know, this is such a... But, you know, Fleabag at the end of the second series when Clare says, like, that Fleabag is the only person she'd run through an airport for.
oh, right, yeah.
Even though they're always fighting. And I think that's such a good... It's that kind of sibling relationship where they don't always see eye to eye and often don't see eye to eye. But
yeah,
it's a real... You know what? It really got my, like, older sister feelings going. There was a few lines in particular that made me really, like, choke up when I was reading them. And I, like, sent it to my sister and was just like, well, I love you. So, would be delighted to see Ali...
Honoured again because former winner of the prize. Yeah.
My next pick is The Fertile Earth by Ruthvika Rao.
Dineen!
I haven't read it.
I have.
Oh, I'm glad. So you must have liked it.
I did. Very much so.
I basically picked you. I'll leave you to talk about it then. But basically, I thought it sounded great, and it's published by One World, who has excellent form with prizes.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I trust to that as much as anything else. It's rare that they're for an independent publisher. It's rare that a big prize goes by where they don't have a book on the Longlist or Shortlist, and they have won the Women's Prize and the Booker. They published their Prophet Song. They published Tara Jones. They published another Women's Prize winner recently.
History of Seven Killings, Marlon James.
They know what they are doing.
Paul Beatty,
because they won 2 years in a row, didn't they?
Yeah, at the Booker.
Goodness me, that's 3 Booker wins and like 2 Women's
such
Prize
good
wins.
taste
And like,
they have,
and I always feel, I don't know if I've mentioned this on here before, but I always feel very fondly of them because Novin and Juliet, who run One World, were my dad's university housemates. Novin
so
was.
Funny,
so I always am also rooting for them because my dad lived with Novin at university, and so which is just a funny serendipity. The very first, when I worked at the bookseller, the very first article I wrote for the bookseller was about One World, and I didn't know that connection was there, and I just sent it to my parents, just being like, my first published article, and Dad was like, did I tell you this? And I was like, no. So
wow. So The Fertile Earth, so this follows 2 pairs of siblings who are of different economic classes, so in India, and following them, I think it starts when they're children in the 1960s, I think.
It's post-independence, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And so, but they're basically from a village where there's basically one family that is very powerful and wealthy. There's two daughters that are of this family, and then there's 2 brothers who are basically working on the estate of and shows their relationship to each other, how all of these children are struggling with their own issues and positions in life, but it follows them over a long period of time as a lot of political changes and social changes occur in the country, and they're very their relationships with each other. And it's just, I think, really wonderfully handled as it follows them over a long period of time and balancing their personal stories with larger things that are occurring in their communities and country.
Awesome.
And really well done. And
great.
I really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. That's another reason to read it then. Oh, that's a nice unexpected match.
Yeah, I'm really delighted at that. So my next pick, so it's kind of nice that this comes after in my pick of Ali Smith, because this is Aerth by Deborah Tompkins.
I haven't come across this one.
Which was only just published recently, but was the joint, I think, first winner of a novella prize, which Ali Smith judged. So she selected this book as a winner. And this novel, it's tricky to summarize because it's... I mean, you could kind of classify it as sci-fi because it's a kind of coming-of-age story following a boy on a planet very much, which has some similarities to Earth, but they're kind of stuck in an ice age. But there is really big emphasis on communal living and mutual support with each other. And he dreams of being an astronaut and gets involved with a program to colonize Mars.
Okay.
And when he goes to Mars, they discover that on the opposite side of the sun, so that we aren't aware of it, there is another planet called Earth, spelled Urth, and that planet, and so he journeys to that planet, which again bears similarities to our Earth, but is different again, where it's become overly hot, and but is also incredibly crowded and is a very competitive and capitalistic society.
So humans on it.
Yeah. So humans on both, and there's it's a kind of like doppelganger thing where there's like parallels between people between these different planets and versions of Earth, and so it sounds very much like a sci-fi story, but I would classify it much more as like a coming of age story and an individual trying to figure out where he belongs and what sort of society he wants to live in, and it's examining this in a way that is just felt so refreshing and new and just a really like unique perspective that I found, and kind of like you, this was one of the last books I read last year, but was also like one of my favorites. And even though it won a novella prize, it's like over 160 pages long, so I think would definitely qualify in terms of word count for this prize, and also it's published by an independent press, and and it has that like nod from Ali Smith, and so I was very heartened recently I've been raving about this book recently, and a member of my book club read it, partly inspired by my enthusiasm for it, and also absolutely loved it, and so it like felt like I didn't let another reader down, and hopefully more people will read and discover this book.
I don't mind a bit of like sci-fi either, you know, like I'm a big Le Guin fan, and one of the
I was going to say it very much reminds me of Le Guin, so
and I read The Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin last year, trilogy, and which is very much sci-fi, and one of my favourite books I read last year.
And there was a sci-fi book on the Longlist last year of the Women's Prize, so
that did not do anything for sci-fi, but you know,
sadly not. No.
My next pick is Manny and the Baby by Varaidzo. I don't know. I
don't know this book at all.
They go by one name.
Okay, yeah.
But she's a former journalist, like she was an editor at Galdem. It's a debut. It's also a dual narrative. A lot of the ones we've talked about are like kind of multi-generational dual narratives. It's split between two sisters in, I think, the 60s in London, one of whom wants to be a writer, one of whom wants to be a dancer, as they kind of grapple with being black and British in 60s London. And then it's also set in like 2012, 2010 in Bath, about two black British men who I think discover some like cassette tapes, and I assume the generations are linked. It sounds really good, and their journalism is interesting. It had some impressive blurbs. Jacqueline Crooks blurbed it, who's on the Longlist Fire Rush. And I think it's got a fair bit about music. And Amelia Warner is a musician, composer. So I wonder if we will see a few books that have like music as a strong theme.
So my next book is in the kind of category that was mentioned earlier, in kind of like very historically set. But it's also kind of adventure story. Saltblood by Francesca de Torres.
Oh, I would love to see this. I haven't read it. She's great. She wrote under a different
so this
name.
is a pseudonym and that she's used for the first time, and she's published other books. I can't remember what her real name is because I've not read any of her other books.
Francesca Haig.
Oh yes, that's right. But I loved
really?
this.
Oh, fun.
Loved
okay.
this.
It's like pirates, female pirates.
Yeah,
right?
it's like a great adventure story, and this won the Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize last year, so it got another prize nod. And it's again like Little Trickerie, based on a real historical case, which there's little historical detail about. So it's very much just sort of like taking this like nugget of information of the past and saying there's a really interesting interesting story here. And an author like built out a full novel from that, but in a way which was so artful and thrilling, and I completely sunk into the story. So it follows a woman who's born in England in the late 1600s, but primarily follows her in her life in the early 1700s. And when she is very young, her mother dresses her up as a boy for kind of like inheritance purposes. But as she becomes a teenager, continues to dress as a man to enter into the Navy. So becomes a sailor for many years while under the guise of a man. And she's not trans, so but dresses as a man for a long period of time. And there are like little like details about like me like wondering like well, how's that even possible? Like living in the confined quarters of a ship, how can the other sailors not realize? And but she gets into the detail of that in a way which is really like oh wow, that's really surprising, and I love how the technical details about this are handled as well.
Does it handle how if she has a period and how she deals with a period? Because that's always top of my list with these things. I believe
so. Yes, I think it must. I think it must deal with that because she's like for years at sea. But then it also follows her in her life I'm not giving too much away because like so much happens in this book. After the Navy, she becomes a pirate in the Caribbean and joins like a pirate fleet, and so gets involved in this way. So it has such a fascinating and adventurous life, and all of those like bare facts are like true to this historical figure, but not much is known else about her. But also she engages in relationship alternately with men and women. So it explores like her queerness, but obviously explores a lot of like gender issues in a really interesting way. Like it's so refreshing, and like I mean like all of those surface details like I think are like adventurous enough, but like the way she approaches like and explores society in such a really interesting way. Like I've always thought of like pirates in a very like stereotypical way, but she like offers it more as like a kind of like alternative like society or like way of life, counter to the prevailing order of the time, and the as a way of eluding the corruption of this larger society, and also the limitations that and like strictures that they impose on people. And so like as a way of like freer having a like freer life, but obviously comes with its own complications and difficulties of like being a pirate, and so just such a sweeping adventure of a story that I was totally wrapped up in. It's obviously very atmospheric and very well written, and all the detail of the time period, but also it's this really like refreshing take on history, and I love like considering characters like based on real figures from the past who you know are sort of like outside the norm, as like a way of how you know that people with differences have like always existed in society, but aren't often recorded in the history book or much detail about them. And so as a way of like expanding upon that and speculating on what life must have been like. I think it's so wonderful, and it was just so much fun to read, but also really smart.
Great, that sounds delightful. I would love to read that.
I'm really like restraining myself because a lot of the books I'm talking about, they're like scattered on like the shelves, so I keep wanting to like pull it down and be like here and a look at it.
My penultimate pick is Good Dirt. I don't know why I said that. Good Dirt. Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson, which I haven't read. But it sounds great, and she wrote Black Cake, which people liked a lot. This is done very well in America. It's a New York Times bestseller and very well reviewed there. It's about a woman who has experienced. Have you read it?
No, I've not, and I don't know anything about it, but I'm aware of it because I was aware of. I've not read Black Cake either, but I was aware it was one I wanted to read.
People like her a lot, and it's one I'm keen to read at least one of her books. It's about a woman who's kind of experienced like a string of tragedies, including her brother dying, which I think has media attention. She grows up in like a wealthy community, but as with not many black families, I believe, and it sort of caused a bit of sensation. So she basically decides to move to like this like sleepy French village to get away from that, and I think discovers a family heirloom from an enslaved ancestor, and it's about her kind of processing where she's come from, where to go. And then I think it also has a subplot where her like ex-fiance turns up in the French village with his new girlfriend, which sounds a bit like rom-com territory, but I don't think that's the tone. But yeah, it just sounds really interesting, and she's obviously a very well-regarded writer. So this is another in my bucket of sort of like books I would really like to read.
Yeah, me too. So my next choice, which I think might be your last choice, of Intermezzo by Sally Rooney.
No.
Okay.
I didn't pick this one. I nearly did. I haven't read it.
In very obvious choice.
And honestly, I feel like it's one of those ones where you never know with those books like that if it is a shoe-in or if it is too kind of its own has its own orbit, doesn't it? I have bought it, but I choose not to. I just need to read it free of like the discourse.
Yeah.
So I can trust that I'm having my own reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, I basically don't like pay attention to any of that because I've read all of her previous books. I really enjoy them and think she's very smart and engaging. And so like I know I kind of don't care what other people are saying and know that there's this.
It's not so much caring what they think. I just think that if you've read like takes on it, it's hard to not have that. It's like if you've watched the film before you've read the book, you end up picturing the characters like the actors because it's in your subconscious. Yeah. So I really liked Conversations with Friends. I was less of a fan of Normal People, but I think that she's such a good writer, and like on a sentence level, I think that she's fab. Okay,
that's really interesting because, I mean, I would still say like Normal People is my favorite, and this is probably my second favorite of her books now.
But I'm also working on a. This is a secret. I shouldn't say something. No, I can say it. I'm working on a chess-related something. I keep meaning to read it because of I'm interested in chess media at the moment.
So I'm sure as many people already know the plot of this, but it primarily follows two brothers, one of whom is kind of chess genius and competes competitively in chess. And but is also kind of chess teacher, and these brothers are quite different ages from each other. They're both dealing with the grief of the recent loss of their father, and it follows their very complicated another complicated sibling relationship over the course of the story, but also affairs that they have with women, and it dips a bit into the perspectives of the women that they have relationships with, but primarily sticks in their points of view, alternating between their stories and their various connections with each other. And I just found very smart, very well done. I really enjoyed reading it, and also thought like the way she engaged with a number of different topics that really worked for me. So I think she deserves prize attention, even though it's been wildly popular, very widely read author, but I think deservedly so.
Right, my last pick is The Safekeep.
Oh, okay. Then yes.
I thought it would be. Yeah. Do you know what? Embarrassingly, I nearly wrote Yael van der Woodsen on this, which is Serena van der Woodsen, Gossip Girl, because just Van der W makes me think of Van der Woodsen. Yeah. But no, I haven't read this, but I'm really looking forward to it. I bought it ages ago. My friend Charlotte is her favourite book of last year. I feel very confident I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah, you will enjoy it. I'm confident as well. Yeah. It feels like my sort of thing. I don't need to sell it to you. Definitely read this regardless of whether it's longlisted.
Booker Prize shortlisted last year, and following two women primarily in a house in the Netherlands. One who is kind of the keeper of the house of the family that moved into this house at a certain point of history, and a woman who's a girlfriend of the brother of the woman who's the keeper of the house, who comes to stay with her. And it's a book very much it's literally in 3 parts, but each part is kind of its own unique section and has this kind of own unique tone to it, and it's really interesting discussing with readers about which part they prefer. I mean, I think the whole book as a whole works together, but like for me, like the third part was like my favorite, and where it all kind of came together. No, I'm not gonna give any with it. Then this is one, as I'm sure you've heard, this has very twisty plot, and there's great surprises in it, and so I'm not gonna spoil any of them.
And it's historical as well, isn't it? Set after the Second World War.
Yeah, after the Second World War in the 50s, I think, primarily. Kind of dealing with the aftermath of that, but there are mysteries at the center of the lives of these characters, and the way it builds their relationships is it's so like gripping and fascinating, and I really it's great.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it.
It's a bit of queerness in there. It's great. And
I'm aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you are backing up my instinct that it's something I will respond to.
I really hope it gets even more attention. Yeah. That's great.
Right. So interesting. We have both largely gravitated towards quite a few historical fiction.
Yeah.
More so than usual.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of things with multiple POVs or like generational stories set over periods of time. Those seem to be the things we think are in the water, whether they actually are or not. Neither of us picked Anne Tyler.
Is that eligible?
Yeah, 3 days in June.
When does that come out?
It's definitely eligible because I checked. Can't remember when.
Oh, okay. I didn't even realize that.
So maybe you would
eligible.
have.
I haven't looked too far into the future of what's being published in my crystal ball.
Because I thought you might. You might pick that one.
Okay.
But
yes,
we
I do love
see.
some Anne Tyler.
I was thinking of the like big ones, like we've covered Sally Rooney and Anne Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors might be in the mix in terms of the kind of books that have had a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it, and I know that some people rave about it, and I also know people who despise it. So. But just in terms of those kind of obvious, like not obvious, but like the ones that like are in the people are talking about, we shall see. We have 5 in common.
Okay, good. Yeah,
which
you counted.
Is pretty good. So the ones we have in common are Shy Creatures by Clare Chambers, There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif, Shafak, Gliff by Ali Smith, The Fertile Earth by Ruthvika Rao, and The Safekeep. How do I say her name as well? Yael van der Wouden?
I'm not entirely sure. I say Yael van der Wouden, but I don't know if that's right.
You know what? Again, I'll watch a YouTube video. We'll perfect our pronunciations.
Don't come for us. Or if you want to spell it phonetically in the comments.
Yeah, but that's pretty good. 5.
Yeah, that's a good amount.
And I think we both also have
considering
a lot
how many options there are.
Yeah, I think we also both had quite a few that the other person had like wondered about, keen to read. Watch it be a completely different 16 books.
As you know, there will always be surprises on the long list.
Always.
Books neither of us have ever heard of.
Or that we hated.
We're like, what?
We will see. I think it has the potential. There's a lot of books when I was looking at what was eligible. There's a lot of books I was interested in. I added a load of books to my to be read pile. I ordered a load of books looking at what was eligible for things that I don't necessarily think would be on this prize list, but that I think sound great. You've really sold me on Confessions. Good. I'm going to go home and order that straight away.
Oh, fingers crossed you like it.
Sounds like the odds are in my favour. And we will see on March 4th what has made it.
Actual long list.
We will then almost definitely do a shortlist prediction. I'm aware that the time crunch means that in order to have filmed it in time to put it up means it's almost impossible certainly from like I don't think it's possible for me to have read 16 books in time to film it in time, like in essentially 3 weeks, because we have to film it in advance.
But hopefully between us we'll have read a fair number of them, so
yeah, we can decide whether we strategically cover all of them or are selfish readers when we see what's on the long list. Hopefully we'll be lucky that between us there's some that we've already read.
And
but
also
we'll
this
definitely do
all just for
videos.
fun, you know, we're not experts, this is just
we are entertaining
speculations.
We love hanging out and talking about books. Essentially. We will do this until even if there's nobody watching. So
love a long geeky conversation bookish conversation with Anna.
So we shall see. Well, basically, what I'm saying is we will do some sort of something as we go through the prize.
Yeah, and we'll see how many of the books we want to commit to reading.
Yes.
But definitely very excited to see what is on the list. And would love to hear from you what you think of our choices. If you have other books you are predicting that you're very much expecting or hoping, or books that you're just interested in reading. And so hope this will give you a nudge for some prize attention that it'll push it up your TBR. Let us know all about that in the comments below. Thank you for watching if you've made it this far. Where it's already very long. stay tuned for the future.
More soon.
Yeah, and so thank you so much for coming back. And as always.
Thanks for having me. My fave.
And we'll hopefully see you all again very soon.
Bye.
Bye.